The little girl's voice was barely above a whisper, but the man standing behind them in line heard every word. She tugged on her mother's coat and asked, "Mommy, do we have enough?" The mother's face went pale as she stared at the groceries on the conveyor belt. Her hands trembled as she reached into her purse, and the man watched as she began to count out crumpled bills and loose change. The cashier waited. Everyone in line waited. And in that moment, time seemed to stand still in that ordinary grocery store on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. Before we continue with this incredible story, if you love hearing about real moments of human kindness that restore your faith in people, please subscribe to Sage Stories and hit that like button. We share these heartwarming stories every week, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Now let's get back to what happened next. David Martinez had stopped at the grocery store on his way home from work. Just like he did every Wednesday, he was a construction manager, still wearing his work boots and dusty jeans, and he just needed to grab a few things for dinner. The store was busier than usual, and he found himself in line behind a woman and her daughter, who looked to be about 6 years old. The little girl had pigtails and wore a pink jacket that had seen better days. She was holding a small stuffed rabbit that was missing one ear. David wasn't really paying attention at first. He was thinking about the project deadline coming up, scrolling through his phone, just waiting his turn. But then he noticed the woman ahead of him carefully placing items on the conveyor belt, and something about the way she did it made him look up. She was arranging everything so precisely, moving slowly, as if each item required a difficult decision. A loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a small package of chicken, a bag of rice, some apples, pasta, a jar of sauce. Everything was basic, nothing extra, nothing that wasn't necessary. The little girl stood close to her mother, unusually quiet for a child her age. She wasn't asking for candy or treats like most kids did in the checkout line. She just stood there holding that worn rabbit, watching her mother with eyes that seemed too serious for someone so young. That's when David heard it, the quiet question that would change everything. "Mommy, do we have enough?" The words cut through the ambient noise of the store, through the beeping of scanners and the conversations of other shoppers. The mother's reaction told him everything. She stopped placing items on the belt. Her shoulders tensed. She looked down at her daughter, with a smile that was trying so hard to be brave but couldn't quite hide the worry underneath. "We'll see, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice cracking just a little. "We'll see." David watched as the cashier began scanning the items. The total climbed higher with each beep. $12, $18, $23. The mother. His hand was already in her purse, and David could see her, fingers trembling as she pulled out what looked like a few bills and started counting change from the bottom of her bag. The little girl held the rabbit tighter. $31.47. That was the total. The mother laid out what she had on the counter. David couldn't see exactly how much it was, but he saw the cashier's face, and he saw the woman's face, and he knew immediately that it wasn't enough. The mother looked at the groceries, then at the money, then at her daughter. Her eyes were starting to fill with tears that she was desperately trying to hold back. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly to the cashier. "I thought I had more. Can you take off the chicken? And maybe the apples?" The little girl looked up at her mother, confused. "But Mommy, you said we were having chicken tonight. You promised." "I know, baby, I know. But we'll have pasta instead. Pasta's good too, right?" Her voice was breaking now, and she wasn't looking at anyone, just staring at the counter. David felt something twist in his chest. He'd been in tough spots before, had struggled when he first started out, knew what it felt like to count every dollar, but it had been a long time, and somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten how that felt, forgotten to really see the people around him who were still fighting those battles. The cashier started to remove items, and the mother was apologizing again, saying she was sorry for holding up the line. Other people behind David were shifting impatiently, sighing, checking their watches, and in that moment David made a decision. He didn't think about it or plan it or wonder if it was the right thing to do. He just stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, and the woman turned to look at him with embarrassed, tearful eyes. "I'd like to pay for your groceries." The woman stared at him like she didn't understand the words. "What?" "Let me get this for you," David said. He pulled out his wallet and handed his card to the cashier. Ring it all up again. Everything she had. No, no, I can't let you do that, the woman protested, shaking her head. That's too much, I can't accept that. Please, David said gently. Let me do this. It would make my day better, honestly. The woman's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they spilled over. She put her hand over her mouth, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The little girl tugged on David's jacket. He looked down at her, and she was smiling up at him with a gap-toothed grin. Are you an angel? She asked seriously. My teacher says angels help people. David felt his own throat tighten. He knelt down to her level. No, sweetheart. Just a regular person who wants to help. Well, you're like an angel anyway, she said matter-of-factly, hugging her rabbit. The transaction went through. The cashier bagged everything, including the chicken and the apples. The woman was still crying softly, wiping her eyes. Thank you, she whispered to David. You have no idea what this means. I just started a new job, but I don't get paid until Friday. And my daughter, she's been so patient, and I promised her we'd have a real dinner tonight. And I just... Her words tumbled out in a rush of emotion and relief. You don't have to explain, David said. We all need help sometimes. As the mother and daughter walked away with their groceries, the little girl turned back and waved at David, still clutching that one-eared rabbit. He waved back, and something inside him felt different, lighter somehow. But the story doesn't end there. As David paid for his own groceries, the woman behind him in line stepped forward. She was an older lady with silver hair, and she had tears in her eyes too. That was beautiful, she said to him. You just reminded me what really matters. And then she did something unexpected. She turned to the young college student behind her, who was buying ramen noodles and cheap bread, and she said, Let me get yours too, dear. The college student's eyes went wide. Really, you don't have to. I want to, the older woman said firmly. Someone just reminded me how good it feels to help. David watched this ripple effect in amazement. The cashier was smiling now, really smiling. Other people in line weren't checking their watches anymore. They were watching, witnessing, feeling something shift in that ordinary grocery store. As David walked to his truck, he saw the mother loading groceries into an old car with a dented bumper. The little girl was in the back seat, and when she saw him, she pressed her hand against the window and waved again. The mother mouthed thank you one more time through the windshield, tears still streaming down her face. But this time they looked like tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope. David drove home that night thinking about that little girl's question. Do we have enough? Such a simple question, but it contained so much weight, so much worry that no child should have to carry, and he thought about his own life, his own blessings, and realized that the answer to that question wasn't just about money in a wallet or food on a table. It was about whether we have enough compassion, enough awareness, enough willingness to see the people around us who are struggling and to reach out a hand. That night cost David $31.47, the equivalent of a couple of coffees throughout the week, or a lunch out or a streaming service subscription, a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. But for that mother and daughter, it was everything. It was dinner on the table. It was a promise kept. It was the knowledge that somewhere out there, strangers still cared. Sometimes the most powerful moments in life happen in the most ordinary places. A grocery store checkout line, a Wednesday afternoon, a simple transaction that becomes something more because someone chose to see another person struggle and respond with kindness. David didn't do it for recognition or praise. He did it because in that moment, when he heard a little girl ask if they had enough, he realized that he had more than enough, and that the truest measure of having enough is whether we're willing to share it. The world can feel overwhelming sometimes, full of problems too big for any one person to solve. But kindness doesn't have to be big to be powerful. It just has to be real. It just has to be given freely, from one human being to another, in the moments when it's needed most. What David did that day didn't change the whole world, but it changed the world for one mother and one little girl with a one-eared rabbit. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. So the next time you're in line at the grocery store, or anywhere else in your daily life, take a moment to really see the people around you. Listen to the quiet struggles, notice the worried faces. Pay attention to the small moments where kindness could make all the difference. You might have more than enough to share, and in sharing it, you might discover that the question isn't really do we have enough, but rather what will we do with what we have? The answer to that question is what defines us. Let your answer be kindness. Let it be compassion. Let it be love in action. And if you've ever experienced a moment of unexpected kindness like this, or if you've been the person who offered it, we'd love to hear your story in the comments below. These stories remind us all of the good that exists in the world, and they inspire others to spread that goodness forward.